When I recently and carefully consider Emmanuel Macron's various statements about Africa, any truly conscious African individual should very quickly and clearly understand everything he has told us and precisely what it fundamentally meant. General Chani recently spoke about a change in tactics or strategy by the French forces in Africa, and I think Macron came to confirm it. The idea is to dissolve and maintain a core setup. And Emmanuel Macron said it so clearly that we can only thank him for his honesty, even if some try to pull the wool over their people's eyes. But reality always catches up in the end. They will not leave certain countries. They have simply dissolved the setup. You won't see them in bases anymore, but in embassies, they'll be there. They'll set up security companies to protect their businesses that exist in those countries, but the soldiers will still be there. You just won't see them in uniform or gathered in bases anymore. That's all it means. They will reorganize, but they will still be there. He spoke about being polite towards certain heads of state by giving them the privilege of announcing the break or the departure of French forces. That doesn't matter much to us, you could say. But what we know is that if you want to break with these imperialist forces, it's simple. You denounce the agreements. Everything starts from there. I think the example of Chad, in any case, is clear. They started by denouncing the agreements. Otherwise, if we don't denounce the agreements and just say that the bases are leaving, we haven't done anything. Because the problem lies in the colonial defense agreements that were signed since independence. The most dangerous ones are not those you see on the bases. The most dangerous are the military advisors. Military advisors exist in all these countries. They also existed in Burkina until the end of 2022, until we took responsibility. And who are these military advisors? They are the ones who are supposed to implement France's policy here. Their job is to keep our armies very weak so that France can always have a reason to remain here. Under Blaise Compaoré, they succeeded. Our sentries would stand guard with sticks. That is what France wants from our armies. When we reach that point, we have no choice but to want them to come and settle here. But at a certain point, the Burkina army managed at one point to get rid of the military advisors. Unfortunately, I think that in 2019, after Operation Otapano, when the French saw that the Burkinabe army still had the capacity to respond to terrorism, they summoned the chief of staff to France. They instructed him to reinstate the military advisors throughout the entire structure. Well, he did not agree. But upon returning to the country, the politicians instructed him to accept the military advisors. And that's when the military advisors returned to the Burkinabe army in 2019. With all the consequences we know, the army was on the verge of disappearing in 2020 and 2021. In fact, that's when many soldiers had to desert because there was no more hope. We were collapsing. That's basically how they operate at the General Staff headquarters, in all the army headquarters. In the school sits them who are supposed to dictate the policy of our army to us. They're the ones who tell us how many to recruit, when to recruit, and what to do with them. They're in the schools to tell us how to train them and so on. As long as these military advisors are there, you're not independent. Your army will only have the appearance of an army, just there to put on parade shows like a circus. But when war comes, you realize that parading is one thing, but war is something else entirely. You have to break the agreements. It's the only way to have an independent army and to build yourself up to be strong. But maybe a lot of people don't understand this. And even with these agreements, France selects officer cadets from our countries to go and train them. It's through these very same agreements. But in reality, most of these officers who go to train in France come back to serve the French state in their own countries. They don't come back to serve our countries. They are trained so that they will serve the interests of the French state. And I have proof of this. When we rose up, many officers in Burkina who had been trained in France were immediately contacted and told that this was the time to take action because they had been trained for this to serve the interests of France. Most of these officers reported back to us. We took note of it, and we continue to monitor the situation. When an officer trained in France returns to his country and unfortunately dies either by accident or on the battlefield, in France, there is a night of tribute to the fallen in the army, just like everywhere else. During this night of tribute to the fallen, the name of the officer in question is mentioned, and it is said, died for France. They don't train him to serve his country. They train him to serve their state. And in many African states, there are plenty of these officers. How many are patriots? Only God knows. This is a lesson that Emmanuel Macron has once again given to African heads of state to catch up and truly be able to lead this fight against imperialism. But on top of that, he also insulted all Africans in his remarks. There was one part that caught my attention where he spoke about ingratitude and said that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. He is human, so our ingratitude cannot be transmitted to him. That's how this man sees Africa, sees Africans. In his eyes, we are not human. Maybe he's the one who's not human. He doesn't put himself in the category of humans. But if there's truly an ungrateful person, it's him. I think that if he's not an atheist and he prays, every morning when he wakes up and prays, he should also pray to Africans. Because it's thanks to our ancestors that France exists today. He should pray to us. In his eyes, we must not be human. We are more than human. He sends very powerful messages. I mourn for the French people, but still he's good for Africa. He is a necessary evil for us. Those who want to wake up, wake up. Those who don't want to wake up, as they say, you can't wake someone who isn't asleep. Africans need to wake up. We must work to be independent, to at least make it so that our people know happiness. And that's what the fight against imperialism is about. We need to decolonize our minds, to take all these factors into account, because the world gives us so many examples to see. For them, there is no morality. They can label you a terrorist today, but tomorrow, with just a word from them, you become a hero. They decide what they do. They talk about democracy, but they carry out constitutional coups among themselves. They talk about human rights, but they decimate populations elsewhere. Africans must wake up. Africa must wake up. And the fight against imperialism is ongoing. And I invite you to join this fight, to work so that we are truly independent, that we are self-sufficient, and that we can develop to know happiness, which is what our people aspire to. Thank you. I wish you a very good day, a very good week, and a very good